and welcome to the Islamic Finance Show. Throughout this series, we're looking at what Islamic finance is and examining particular elements specific to it. Digital technology is changing the landscape of the financial services industry. So on today's show, we're looking at the relationship between Islamic finance and financial technology, more commonly known as Fintech. We live in a digital world which is developing rapidly in the business of finance, but is Islamic finance capitalizing on this? To answer these questions and more, I have joining me today Marwa Adawi. She's technical lead at Yielders. She also has been listed in the Woman Eye Top Most Influential Women in Islamic Business and Finance 2019. And also joining me is Amina Ahmed, a Fintech innovation and product consultant. Welcome to you both, ladies. It's really good to have you here. Now, the very first and obvious question for those watching who might not know what Fintech is, what is Fintech? And indeed, what is the relationship between Fintech and Islamic finance as compared with Fintech and conventional finance?
In very simple terms, Fintech is short for finance technology, and Fintech simply provides financial products and services underpinned by technology.
So by that, could you expand on that a little bit? So when you say technology, we're talking about mobile phones. People can access their finances via mobile phones beyond just doing online banking on a laptop.
Correct. So essentially what we've done is we've democratized the existence of finance and finance products, and all through the use of your mobile phones, apps, etc. So you're in a click of a button completing a number of transactions that would normally take days or weeks to complete. Essentially, it's at a click of a button. You have onboarded online. You've completed a process online from A to B without having to leave your home.
And onboarded essentially means you've got approval. Say, for example, you're opening a bank account. Approval is quicker. That's what onboarding means.
Correct.
Yeah?
That's what it means.
And what about its relationship to Islamic finance?
I think it's exactly what you were talking about, but it's really accessibility and the flexibility that it gives you as well. I think that's what Fintech's really kind of strong in. And it is just technology. It's just another access point for people to join. But for me, I think the big opportunity and the crossover can be around transparency. So actually, what are we buying? What are we using? How do we use it? And how do we take more responsibility and I think control over the financial services that we engage with and the ones that we need to live our lives? Because that's ultimately what we're all here to do. You know, whether you're a bank, so a conventional financial services institution, or if you're new and you're Yielders and you're being very specific around saying this is who we are catering to. So being quite specific and targeted, and it just gives, for me, and what I try to do with all my clients is it's around what gives you that great customer experience. I think that's what it's a great enabler
So the
of.
objectives essentially are the same, whether it's across conventional finance or Islamic finance. Am I correct?
I think culturally there's differences. I would say. I think for the challenges, and if you want to put Islamic finance, and I think there's definitely strong cases where Islamic finance innovators are in the market.
Correct.
I think there's an attitude and a mindset of those teams. So it's people. It's always people at the end of the day who are building these things. And I think the conventional or the incumbent, so people who have been here for a long time,
they need to have a change in their
it's
mindset.
scary for sure.
So expand on that for me, Marwa.
So in terms of conventional finance, you look at it, people think it's still acceptable to go, you enter a bank and then you take all of your documents with you and you open up a bank account, etc. And that process has not really changed as much. However, what we want to do is we want to change that mindset. We want to digitize, and I think banks have finally understood that this needs to be digitized and what can be done about it.
So in terms of the halal economy, where does Fintech fit into that?
I think it's a market that is untapped and underserved. I think it encompasses people who are financially excluded currently, for me, so people who don't have access actually to a lot of the financial instruments that would make their lives better. So it's this really odd catch-22 situation, and I think we've got huge market opportunity to do it around, for me, and I think you're better qualified for this question, this part of the question, but when we talk about halal finance, we're talking about faith-based financing. This is not unique to Islam. This is not unique to Muslims who want this. This is a faith-based transaction, and it's faith-based economies, and they are thriving all over the world. The US is a great example for Christian faith-based finance. So I think we need to, in my view, in the Islamic finance industry, start to pull back and stop being so tunnel vision around it's just about us and what we're doing, and start to look around and look at the lessons that can be learned and create companies that are fulfilling a need. And I think Yielders is really doing that, actually.
And talking about that, Yielders is fulfilling a need. Can you just give us a little bit of an insight about what Yielders offer and how it was set up, indeed?
Sure. So Yielders is we're making real investment opportunities available to everyone. That's our tagline. At Yielders, Yielders did come into being because it was the halal economy, the halal Islamic finance industry we felt was underserved. We looked for opportunities out there, and we could not find anything that was that is aligned with our faith, that we can invest in an ethical manner, that's transparent, that can give us halal returns, and that's where Yielders came into being. Essentially, what we do is we have lowered the barriers to entry into a relatively inaccessible asset class, which is real estate. Real estate traditionally is very difficult to get onto the top property ladder, and what we wanted to do is just bring the democratization of finance, lower the barriers to entry so people can actually get on the property ladder without having to go through the hurdles of waiting until perhaps they're in their 30s. So what we want to do is we enable people to invest from as little as £100 on the platform, earn a rental income, receive halal returns, and at the end of the investment term, when we're ready to sell, they also get a profit share. And all of that is underpinned by technology. It was quite a difficult process. We are dual regulated, so we are FCA regulated, and we are also Sharia. We have got our Sharia certification.
I'd like to talk about that, if I may, because I've been doing my research, and I understand it took 2 years to get all the compliance side of the business in place. Of course, you've got the law of the land, the UK legal system to adhere to, but then as a second tier, because it's an Islamic offering, you've got the Sharia compliance side of things to adhere to as well. So am I right in thinking it took 2 years?
It is correct. So obviously it was side by side. So we started our FCA regulation process, but we were also looking at the Sharia compliance aspect. And I think innately what we did with Yielders is, instead of starting it out as a Sharia compliant product, we based it on Sharia, which means it's Sharia based. And then it's a lot easier because we're then starting out with a blank canvas. We didn't have, with a fintech company generally, you're not dealing with 3 debts. So there's specifically 3 debts that all other conventional businesses have to deal with, or conventional financial institutions. And this is the debt of technology. You've got the debt of operations and debt of products. And with fintech, you don't have to go through all of that. So Yielders, going back to your question with regards to the regulation, everything was vetted, from our processes to our legal documents to our onboarding process, investment process, and then obviously every single thing had to go through again, but another layer tier with Sharia compliance. And we received our certification from Sheikh Abu Isa, and which was actually backed by the UK IFC as well.
Amina, this process, 2 years, could that possibly be off-putting for certain people who want to have some innovation within the Islamic economy? Because there's a lot of businesses and there's a lot of space for innovation at the moment.
The best kind of parallel I can draw to this. So is it off-putting? Not if you're really determined, probably not, and clearly not. But the best kind of parallel is definitely the FCA had to create their own innovation unit to allow for fintechs or startups to break into what they had made quite an arcane and very complicated and buddy system, is the best that I can kind of summarise it as. And that's not, disparaging to them. It's just the way that organisations grow and build themselves, and you don't realise yourself. I've worked for banks, I've worked with the FCA. that happens, it's really normal. I'm sure that I've done it and become that kind of, created that kind of organisation because it's the way we've always done things. But actually you need to start to adapt and look forward and say, well, what do customers want? Because the whole reason we exist is because we are fulfilling customer needs. And I think actually Islamic finance could do with that level of, focus for looking at the future. How do we start to take this forward? And if that means creating a little innovation hub within each different, because again, this is a complication, within each different jurisdiction,
it becomes tricky because obviously you've got to adhere to the law of the land. So if we look globally, every country, every jurisdiction has its own
set of regulations.
Absolutely. And with this Islamic finance or indeed any kind of Islamic business, then this is what I was referring to. Could that be off-putting? Because depending if you want to grow your business.
For the UK, I think for the UK it is for sure, but we do not think kind of broadly enough because we don't look at how Malaysia have handled this exact issue, and they've just gone leaps and bounds. And most of, kind of Asia Pacific have just gone, what, we know we've got burgeoning population, we know that they have got consumer spending, they have got that buying power and they want to be able to purchase. And how do we enable that? And how do we remain Sharia compliant? So for Malaysia, for Indonesia, for the Philippines, and for Singapore to a certain extent, and Hong Kong as well. And they have all within those jurisdictions, the law of the land is only the law of the land when it is serving the people that it's serving. So regulation has to adapt to what people need. And they've done really, really well, I think, in terms of making it super easy.
They have. I mean, like for instance, in the UK, when Yildiz came into being, it was an untapped market. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know. We kind of paved the way to something we thought is going to be revolutionizing the Islamic fintech industry. And I think we have achieved that because after we have come into being, I feel like there has been a lot more Islamic fintechs cropping up, and that's great for the Islamic economy. It will serve it, and we took it as an opportunity. We never took it as a challenge or a hurdle that cannot be overcome. It was simply, we didn't know what to expect. However, now that the way is paved, it actually is possible, which means I don't think it would quite deter people now to take it on like they would have done a few years ago.
And also, to be fair, the UK is the leading fintech hub globally, and also the regulators have been quite progressive, irrespective of what people think. Yeah. I think the regulators in the UK are quite progressive on this front. They want fintech or any tech-related businesses to flourish in the UK.
And they engage really well as well. That's the thing, and they make themselves available, so they communicate quite a lot. I would say, just picking up on some of the points that you've made, I absolutely think that you've pioneered particularly the financial side of it. So how do we start to look at a different way of bringing in, like just churning the money, churning cash and looking at fiat currencies. But we're just missing a trick around services in general. So actually, when you look at property, look at Trussell. Trussell is not technically an Islamic finance outlet, but you can get mortgages and principles that follow ethical and actually quite progressive interpretations of regulation.
That's correct. However, if you look at that, it's Sharia compliant, however not Sharia based. There is a difference,
absolutely.
Whereby they are re-engineering some of their products to then tick those boxes and say, actually, we are now Sharia compliant.
And they're making it easier, right, and the more transparent. So they're doing all of the principles of Sharia already, but you're right, and then having to go back and reverse engineer because there wasn't that option before they started for them to go, oh, well, we need to sit down and go through the entire... And they are looking at services, let's just be really clear, right? They're not actually churning money necessarily at the moment. So they are... get a mortgage in principle, and then they're kind of linking up with the different...
I think one of the other challenges for any kind of fintech, Islamic fintech, or particularly Islamic fintechs, is to ensure that every step of the way, the full life cycle of any transaction is Sharia compliant. So tell me the challenges around that, if indeed you've experienced any.
Yes. So I think it wasn't a challenge as such because we nailed it in, right from the start outset. The reason behind Yielders was Islamic principles. We're going to follow the basic Islamic principles as in interest-free, so no debt. So I'll elaborate a bit more on that. We actually pre-fund all of our assets, which means they are cash-based. We've outright purchased them in cash, so there's no debts, mortgages involved at all. We're not reliant.
It fits very nicely within the Islamic principles of have asset-backed investment. Yeah,
exactly correct. Secondly, transparency, as you mentioned before, transparency is absolutely vital. And when I say transparent, we've stripped out all of our fees. So what you see is what you get. It's not like we quote everything in net profits. We don't quote anything in gross profits. So most of the time with opportunities, real estate opportunities, people have kind of a little bit of a negative feeling about it because they think, oh, actually I'm seeing this, but I'm not going to get this. And that's where we try to kind of change the mindset and say, actually, this is one of the things I say to all of our customers, what you see is what you get.
Now, I'd just like to bring your attention, because you are a fintech operation, to the security side of things, because we've got Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal and various other scandals that have happened over the years, which have really hit public confidence in the financial services industry. Now, fintech, share with me, both of you, you're the fintech experts, about the security side and how can consumers' fears be allayed around this?
So we can't move away from the fact that everything is cloud-based at the moment, and with that there comes risks. However, you can mitigate against these risks, and you've got certain technology, you've got cybersecurity experts, and in order to deter that, you need to ensure that you're constantly keeping up to date. Firstly, with technology, and secondly, with all of the cybersecurity side of things. That how can you deter anyone from hacking into your accounts, etc. So keeping ahead of the game is one of the key aspects of being in fintech, being on the cloud. We recently, obviously our technology doesn't stop where it started. We've come such a long way, and I work closely with our tech team, and there's constantly what seems like a very simple process in the front end, just one click of a button, actually throws 100 calls to different API, I'll keep it in very simple terms, different third-party application providers in the back end, because we are trying to omit the different processes that are traditionally involved in onboarding a user, which is in very simple terms, taking your documentation, for instance, into a bank, and then the operations team are involved in order to make sure that there's anti-money laundering checks that are done. You have your account is set up, etc. However, what we're doing is taking these documentations all at the same time, processing it, making sure that all anti-money laundering checks are done and e-wallets are created all at a click of a button.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, this seems really comprehensive, but is it comprehensive enough? Not necessarily in relation to your organisation, but generally across the fintech industry?
I would say, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I'm a huge proponent of cloud. I think cloud-based is actually what's going to give customers, access and control over their own data, ultimately as we progress and as we go forward, and that's the way I believe products and services are heading.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on what Marwa's just shared?
So I just think it's what you are required to do by the regulator, it's what you're required to do legislatively, because that's what will protect customers, and that is the best case of protecting customers at the moment. I think when we're looking at, the misuse of data, and again, that just comes down to people who are running these companies. That's what it really comes down to. This isn't about we are losing things, accidentally, and we're kind of releasing people's data. It's around it's how much focus do you put onto protecting customers. Again, like I've said, I'm so sorry.
But that is our focus. That is exactly what, we develop products for our users. We ensure their safety and security is at utmost importance. And you can only do that by following technology trends. You can't stagnate, unfortunately. It's not unfortunately, it is fortunately, we're in an era where we can expand and we can, keep the customer in mind.
And talking of, the consumers, your everyday consumer, we're not talking high-level consumers, somebody who might want to invest in property or elsewhere, even pure and simple banking. Now, some of the research I've done really highlights the fact that consumers get very confused about terminology, language being used within this arena.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, and what do you think is the way forward in that? And as your business, and Amina, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well, because the simpler you keep it so that consumers understand, doesn't that give them a bit more empowerment?
I mean, I'm just going to jump in really quickly,
Sure.
broad piece. Consumers, it's what's the outcome that they're after. So actually it's not, I may go in and say I want a current account or I want to be able to invest and I want to do it ethically, but actually why do I want to do that? What is it going to enable me to do? And I think that's a really beautiful part of working with startups and kind of in the fintech space.
Message.
And with innovators. Well, it's actually, you go after those types of customers, you start talking to customers and say, what is it that you need to achieve in your life, which is the whole purpose of banking and financial services.
And then communicate that in a language later on.
Well, I think it becomes natural then to the organisation, because it's always...
So going from the consumers backwards.
Absolutely, because it's always then about, Samina wants to be able to do that, and that means that we create a product that is an investment vehicle. So actually you can invest in this and we won't bother you with all of this stuff around, funds and whatever else is going on behind it, because you very specifically for your demographic and for whatever else we've kind of, profiled you on, are comfortable and then trust us to deliver what you have asked us to deliver, which was not initially, you're coming in and saying, I want this account that does a very, you were saying, I want to be able to grow my money and retire, but I want to be able to feel good about that. Okay,
and I presume you've implemented that?
Yeah, 100%. So, I'll give you a very small example. So we hold workshops at our offices, and one of the key sort of users, people come in and think. At the start, we used to use abbreviations, like for instance SPV, and everyone's like, "What is SPV?" And then as we went along in the business, we stayed clear from using abbreviations like that will confuse the customer, and just making it very simple. Okay, I'm not going to give you the headache of how I've acquired the asset, how we've gone through all of the legalities involved, how we've now found
just share
tenants.
What the consumer wants.
Exactly, and just keep it very, very simple. I go on the platform, and in fact, I actually say, think about online banking and think about Rightmove. What do you think when you put them together? That's what essentially what Yildiz is doing, is allowing you to go online, create an account, and then find the best investment opportunity and go ahead and make your investment and your rental in return. And then at the end of your investment term, you're getting a profit share.
All very transparent, very quickly.
I think Money Mint in the UK is just, they're embodying that whole principle. They are not saying this is only for people who want to be Sharia compliant. No. They're literally just saying, this is the way that we do it. It's ethical, sustainable finance. We're doing it a bit differently. They've got some cool branding going on. Exactly.
Okay. Ladies, this is so interesting. I could talk to you all day, but unfortunately we're out of time, so thank you. As mentioned earlier in the show, we'll be exploring a different aspect or issue related to Islamic finance as we progress through the series, so do tune in every week. Also, if you'd like to comment or share your thoughts and opinions on what we've discussed today, then tweet us at Islam Channel or contact us via Facebook on Islam Channel TV with hashtag The Islamic Finance Show. We'd love to hear your thoughts and views. Next time, we'll discuss the controversial topic of rebranding Islamic finance. In recent years, several Islamic banks have removed the word Islamic from their names and have claimed an uptake in business. Now, while some in the industry welcome this, others don't. So it's sure to be an interesting discussion. My thanks again to my guests for joining me today, and of course for you watching at home. See you next time.